Ted Bundy, one of America's most notorious serial killers. He murdered at least 30 young women, probably more, between 1974 and 78. Terror and Horror, 1989. Electric Chair, Execution. But there's a detail, one most people don't know. Ted Bundy was a father. He had a daughter, Rose Bundy, born in 1982, while her father was on death row. What happened to this little girl? How did she grow up as the daughter of America's worst serial killer? Here's the untold story of Rose Bundy. Silence, secrecy, and the weight of being a monster's daughter. Meeting Carole Ann Boone, early 1970s. Olympia, Washington, Department of Emergency Services. Ted Bundy and Carole Ann Boone work in the same office. Carole is a single mother. She has a son, James, 4 years older than Ted. Ted at that time appears kind, charming. Boy next door looks. Nobody knows his true face. I liked Ted immediately, Carole says later. We hit it off well. He struck me as being a rather shy person, with a lot more going on under the surface than what was on the surface. He was more dignified and restrained than the more certifiable types around the office. He would participate in the silliness part way, but remember, he was a Republican. In those days, Ted is with another woman, Elizabeth Klopfer, 5-year relationship. Ted acts as a father figure to Elizabeth's 3-year-old daughter, Molly. But there are things Elizabeth doesn't know. Terrible things. 1974. Ted starts committing his first murders. Seattle area. Young women disappearing. 1975. Arrest. Utah. Kidnapping charge. Carole supports Ted when he gets into legal trouble. She believes in his innocence. Some sources even say Carole helped Ted in his 1977 prison escape by smuggling in cash. Unconfirmed, but shows how deep their relationship was. Death row. 1978. Ted Bundy spreads terror. In Florida, he kills 2 women at the Chi Omega sorority house. He kidnaps and murders 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. 1979. Trial begins. Ted Bundy in the defendant's chair. The courtroom is packed. Among the spectators are young women. Groupies, a strange phenomenon. Some part their hair in the middle and wear it straight, mimicking the look of Ted's victims, a sick admiration. Among them sits Carole Ann Boone. Glasses, quiet, loyal. Throughout the trial, Carole is there every day, supporting Ted. Ted doesn't belong in jail, she says. The things in Florida don't concern me any more than the things out west do. She blindly believes in Ted's innocence, or wants to believe. 1980. There's a strange loophole in Florida law, allows marriage in the courtroom. Ted asks Carole during the trial, on court record, "Carole Ann Boone, will you marry me?" Carole stands up. "Yes." Ted, "Then I pronounce you my wife," in front of a judge, officially married. Ted has already been sentenced to death for the Chi Omega murders, but Carole doesn't lose hope. February 10th, 1980. Ted is sentenced to death for the 3rd time for Kimberly Leach's murder. When the sentence is announced, Ted stands and shouts, "Tell the jury they were wrong!" But it doesn't help. Appeals begin, a long process. Carole visits Ted at Florida State Prison with her son James regularly. Conjugal visits are prohibited in prison, but inmates find a way. They pool their money, draw lots, bribe guards, arrange brief encounters in the bathroom or behind the water cooler. Ted wins the lottery, or maybe pays more money. We don't know. October 24th, 1982. Rose Bundy is born, a baby girl, the daughter of a father on death row, the baby of America's worst serial killer. Carole and Rose live in Gainesville, Florida, on the edge of poverty, describes the book, The Only Living Witness. Ted is in prison. Carole raises Rose alone, with James, 2 children, hard times. Prison, family life. Rose is a small child. She doesn't really know her father, but Carole takes her for prison visits. There are photos. Ted, Carole, and little Rose. Together, a strange family picture. Domestic bliss on death row. In some photos, Ted is smiling, Rose in his lap, as if he were a normal father. But behind the walls is the truth. Ted is a monster. He's killed at least 30 women, maybe more. Rose makes a drawing with markers, sends it to her father. "I love you, Daddy," she writes. An innocent child. She doesn't know who her father is, what he's done. Just the man behind the glass, her father. For years, Ted claims his innocence. Carole believes believes him, defends him, supports his appeals. But mid-1980s, the relationship starts to wear. Ted is exhausting, obsessive, demanding, constantly needs something. Carole's friend Diane Smith remembers. He was exhausting, obsessive, demanding, moody, always needing as if she didn't have enough to do. Eventually, Carole was just tired of him. Carole's letters to Ted decrease over time. Visits become less frequent. She's tired, exhausted. Rose is growing up, 4 years old, 5 years old, probably asking questions. Where's my daddy? Why isn't he at our house? Carole finds answers, maybe lies, hiding the truth. The truth emerges 1988. Ted's execution is approaching. Appeals are being rejected. Time is running out. Ted is panicking, looking for ways to avoid death. He thinks of a strategy. Maybe if he reveals where the bodies are, he can buy more time, delay the execution. One day, Ted calls Carole from prison, one of his last calls. He asks a question. Should he tell where some of the bodies are? To give families closure. Maybe he'll gain more time. Carole is shocked. That was his way of telling her, says Diane Smith, that there were bodies that he knew about and that he had actually killed all those people. Carole, who believed in Ted's innocence for years, finally learns the truth. Her husband is a monster, a liar, a manipulator. He's killed at least 30 women, maybe more. Carole is devastated. That call was just devastating for her. She was really angry. I'm surprised she talked to him at all. On that call, Ted wants one more thing. He wants to talk to Rose. He wants to say goodbye to his daughter. Carole says no. So there was no goodbye for Rosa, says Diane Smith. He wanted to talk to Rosa, and she said no. Rose is only 6 years old at the time. She doesn't know who her father really is. And Carole doesn't want Rose to learn this truth, at least not this way. 1986. Carole files for divorce. 3 years before Ted's execution, a 13-year relationship ends. The marriage is over. Carole and Rose no longer visit Ted. No phone calls. Communication is cut off. Escape and new life. After the divorce, Carole and Rose leave Florida. They move to Washington, escaping from the media, from the public, from the connection to Ted Bundy. They probably changed their names. New identities, new life. Carole, who was talkative until the trial, suddenly disappears from the map. No interviews, no photos. They vanish. Rose is 7 years old, probably starting elementary school, with a new name, a new identity. Her friends don't know who Rose's father is. Her teachers don't know. She lives like an ordinary girl, but she's not ordinary. January 24th, 1989. Ted Bundy is executed. Florida State Prison, electric chair. The execution takes place at 7 in the morning. There's a crowd outside the prison. Some are celebrating, shouting, "Burn, Bundy, burn." That morning, Ted tries to call Carole one last time to say goodbye. Carole doesn't accept the call. They don't speak. Ted dies. Rose is 7 years old, technically fatherless, but Rose never really knew her father, just prison visits. A man behind glass, a stranger seen once a week. How many memories does Rose have of her father? We don't know. Maybe very few, maybe none. What does Carole tell Rose? Does she say, "Your father died"? Does she say, "He was sick"? Does she say, "He was a bad man"? We don't know. Rose has never spoken. Growing years, silence and secrecy. Rose Bundy grows up with her mother, Carole, and stepbrother James. In Washington, nobody knows where Rose is, what city she lives in, what school she attends. Complete secrecy. Carole does this to protect Rose. 9 years old, 10 years old, entering adolescence. At some point, Rose must have learned the truth, who her father was, what he did. Maybe Carole told her. Maybe someone at school said something. Maybe she found something on the internet. Imagine that moment. Learning your father was America's worst serial killer, that he murdered at least 30 women, raped them, tortured them. What trauma that must have been for Rose. She can't tell anyone because nobody knows. She has to keep the secret. She probably lies to her friends. "My father died," she says. From illness, maybe. It must have been a nightmare. In the 1990s, curiosity grows. Ted Bundy documentaries, movies, books. The Buffalo Bill character in The Silence of the Lambs was partly inspired by Ted Bundy. Everyone asks, what happened to Ted Bundy's daughter? But Rose doesn't speak. She stays silent. No interviews, no photos. Completely away from the public. Completely hidden. 2008, writer Ann Rule republishes her book about Ted Bundy, The Stranger Beside Me. Ann Rule met Ted in the early 1970s at a suicide prevention hotline. They work together without knowing Ted's true face. In the new edition of the book, she adds a sentence. I have heard that Ted's daughter is a kind and intelligent young woman, but I have no idea where she and her mother may live. They have been through enough pain. Ann Rule deliberately didn't investigate. They deserve privacy, she says on her website. I have deliberately avoided knowing anything about Ted's ex-wife and daughter's whereabouts. Respect, a rare thing in the media world. Some sources claim Rose views her father as a monster, but it can't be confirmed because Rose has never spoken to the public. 2019, Ted Bundy documentaries on Netflix, Conversations with a Killer, The Ted Bundy Tapes, movies, extremely wicked, shockingly evil and vile. Zac Efron plays Ted Bundy. Lily Collins plays Carole Ann Boone. Rose would be 37 years old then. Maybe she watched these documentaries. Maybe she didn't. We don't know. 2025. Today, Rose would be 42 or 43 years old. Where does she live? What does she do? Is she married? Does she have children? What profession? What city? Nobody knows. And Rose wants it that way. The weight of being a monster's daughter. Rose Bundy's story is a story of silence. A woman trying to escape her father's horrific crimes, trying to find her own identity. Rose did nothing wrong. She was born an innocent baby, but she lives as the daughter of America's worst serial killer. Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 women, maybe more. Families were destroyed. Lives were extinguished. Parents lost their children. Rose lives with this legacy, not by choice, but an unavoidable reality. How does society look at Rose? A monster's daughter, a killer's DNA, prejudices, fears. But Rose is not guilty, just an innocent child, born in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her mother, Carole, did the best thing. She protected her daughter, escaped the media, changed their names, disappeared. It said Rose received therapy to cope with her father and his legacy. Unconfirmed, but logical. How do you live with such a burden? How do you build a normal life? Maybe Rose is happy today. Maybe she's living a peaceful life. Maybe she has a family, a job, friends. Or maybe she struggles every day with who her father was. Can't tell anyone. Has to keep the secret. We don't know, and maybe we shouldn't know. Rose Bundy chose privacy. She chose silence, and that's her right. A monster gave her life, but she doesn't define that monster. Rose Bundy is Ted Bundy's daughter, but she's also Rose, her own identity, her own story, in the shadow of darkness, but searching for her own light, silently, strongly, by surviving. Ted Bundy was executed in 1989. His crimes must never be forgotten. His victims must never be forgotten. At least 30 women, at least 30 families, countless destroyed lives. Rose Bundy lives somewhere unknown today, keeping her silence. A serial killer's daughter, but also a survivor, a victim of her father's choices, but the architect of her own life. For over 40 years, Rose has remained hidden. No photos, no interviews, no clues. This is perhaps one of history's best-kept secrets. Rose's story teaches us something. Children are not responsible for their parents' crimes. Rose Bundy deserves to find her privacy, her peace, and her own identity. And perhaps this is the greatest triumph, finding strength in silence, escaping from darkness, and living in her own light, breaking free from her father's shadow, carving her own path. Rose Bundy, a name, a story, a secret, forever.